Are you not sure what kind of equipment that you need to be able to produce songs at home? Well, in this video, I'm going to cover the essential pieces of equipment that you need to be able to record and produce your own music. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click the subscription button, turn on the notification bell so you can get alerted every time I upload a video about music production for songwriters and music producers. I've been producing music for over 15 years, and today I'm going to show you the bare essentials of the equipment that you need to be able to produce songs that you'll be proud of in your own home studio. So let's jump in. So let's start at the first spot, which is the digital audio workstation, or DAW. This is the place where you pull together all of the different components to make a song. So you'll be recording audio in here, you'll be playing MIDI, you'll be using plugins to mix your songs, you'll be doing all that inside of the digital audio workstation, and you need to have one that you feel really comfortable with in order to produce a good product. Now, if you've been doing any sort of research on DAWs, you know that there are a ton of options out there. Anything from FL Studio to Ableton to Pro Tools to Cubase to Logic to all kinds of other options. But what you need to determine out of all these options is which one makes the most sense to you. My advice to you would be to try 2 to 3 different DAWs, watch a couple of basic tutorials that give you a rundown of the program, try it out for yourself and figure out which one feels the most natural for you, and then jump in full steam. Now, I personally started out with FL Studio a long time ago, back when it was like FL Studio 3, where you couldn't record audio, you couldn't do anything like that. It was strictly programming and sequencing and MIDI and that kind of stuff initially. But after using FL Studio for a while, I actually migrated over to try Logic, and I honestly didn't love the experience, so I ended up migrating back to using FL Studio again. And then on occasion, I've been using Ableton as well. So the second component that we're going to talk about is the audio interface. And the reason that we talk about this next is it's kind of like the central hub for all the audio that comes in and out of your DAW. With an audio interface, you're going to be able to input instruments such as electric guitars and bass and keyboards, but you can also record things like vocals or drums or anything else with microphones and bring it into your system. And another thing that the audio interface is going to allow you to do is actually monitor the sound that's coming out of the DAW, whether that's through headphones or actual studio monitors that you have up in your room. And there are lots of different layers and levels of quality of audio interfaces. If you want to start out at a level of about $100, I think a good audio interface to look at would be the PreSonus Audio Box 96, which gives you 2 inputs and a pair of speaker outputs. And another option would be the Focusrite Scarlett Solo, which allows you to do 1 instrument cable, but also 1 microphone cable. The only disadvantage to that is if you end up having like a keyboard where you need to input both lines left and right, you can't do that with the interface because it doesn't have the ability to do both the 1/4 inch on both sides. So that might be a little bit of a restriction that you want to think about. I think when you step up to about the $150 range to the $170 range, you can get a couple of really nice audio interfaces. I would highly suggest the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 or the PreSonus 26C, which are both great interfaces which allow you to do either 2 1/4 inch or 2 XLRs, and they both have phantom power, and then they have some outputs on the back as well. The Focusrite has a couple of additional features such as the air pad switch on it. I don't use Focusrite, so I can't speak to it, but I know that they're quality interfaces. If you want to go a notch above that level, I would look at something like the Audient ID14. And this audio interface has a lot better preamp quality than some of the lower price audio interfaces that we've talked about so far. And I think the price point for that is around $300 US. But essentially what you want to be looking for is, does it offer the amount of inputs that you're going to need for your particular use case? So for me, I know that I record an instrument sometimes, I do my vocals sometimes, there are occasions where I record some other kinds of things, but I don't need a whole lot of channels all at once to record. If I was a drummer, I would need to look at an audio interface that maybe had a whole bunch more inputs, which would bring my cost up a little bit. So just look at your particular situation, think about the kinds of instruments and the kinds of things that you need to record, and then plan accordingly. But you also might want to look at finding an audio interface that has a little bit of room to grow. And what I mean by that is that maybe it has a couple of additional inputs in the back or outputs in the back that would allow you to expand to using things like preamps or outboard compressors or different things that you might want to use down the line. That'll cost you a little bit more money up front, but if it's something that you really love doing, it might be worth the extra expense to look into that. One of the advantages of also getting an audio interface is that it usually comes with at least one, maybe two free DAWs for you to be able to try out, as well as some plugins that you can use, VST plugins, and potentially some instruments as well that you can integrate into the DAW that you end up using. So make sure that you register your device once you get it, and then download all of the free software that you can get from that, so that will open up your sound selection even more right at the beginning of your journey. Now, the third component that we're going to talk about is a microphone. Now, there are a couple different varieties of microphones. We're only going to talk about two right now. One is the dynamic microphone and the other is the condenser microphone. The dynamic microphone doesn't require 48-volt phantom power to operate it, but it does require a lot more gain from your preamp in your audio interface, or if you're using an external preamp, be able to get a usable signal for your recordings. So just keep that in mind, especially if you've gotten a cheaper audio interface. Usually when you go higher on the gain in a cheaper audio interface, the quality of the sound that you get out is a lot less because there's more noise that comes into your system when you're using a cheaper version of an audio interface. So sometimes it might be more beneficial to think about getting a condenser microphone. I would recommend looking at microphones that fall in that range of about $200 to $400 for a condenser microphone in order to get something that's pretty solid that will work for you for years to come. I looked into the Rode microphones and found one that was right around the price range of $230 to $250 US. And that was one of the microphones that I researched getting before I settled on the one that I decided to get. So when I finally purchased a condenser microphone, I actually got a more expensive version of the microphone because I just had read a lot of reviews on it. I had watched a lot of content about it, and it felt like it was going to be a better purchase for me. I ended up purchasing the Audio-Technica AT4033CL, and the time that I purchased it, it was about $250 to $300, but the price point has gone up on that particular microphone, and I think it's sitting around $370 to $400 US now. One caution that I will give to you is don't buy a microphone based on its looks. I made that mistake early on and I purchased a microphone that was decently expensive, but it ended up really not working for me very well. And I wish that I had spent a little bit more time doing research on it and figuring out that it really wasn't what I needed. If you can't go the route of buying a more expensive condenser microphone right now, I would highly suggest looking at something like the SM57. It is a dynamic microphone, meaning it's going to need more gain, but I can tell you from experience that I have used that and continue to use that microphone both on primary vocal recordings and on background vocal recordings and get great results with it. I have to finagle a little bit more in the mixing process to get something more usable, but once you figure out how it works, you can actually get a really good vocal take. If this is helping you out, go ahead and crunch that like button. So the fourth component that we're going to talk about is a MIDI keyboard. And the reason that we're talking about this is because it's such a versatile product to have in your studio. The reason that I think a MIDI keyboard is so versatile in a studio is it gives you a much more hands-on feel for when you're playing virtual instruments. And it also gives you the ability to get a more humanized feel out of the instruments that you are playing. I use my MIDI keyboard on a regular basis to program out drums and to also do virtual instruments like strings or bass or synthesizers or all kinds of other things. And it is one of those components that I wish that I had gotten a lot sooner in my studio. Now, it's true that you don't have to have a MIDI keyboard. You can draw in chords, you can draw in melodies, you can draw in patterns for the drum with a mouse and your DAW, and that's perfectly fine. And I have seen many producers that work that way and produce incredible results. I personally love to have the MIDI controller because it allows me to put a much more human touch on my productions, where I can play soft or I can play loud, and I can adjust the timing for when things hit to give it a much more natural feel in my productions. And I think the best MIDI keyboard for you is going to depend on the space that you have available. I personally am using an Akai MPK Mini 2 right now because I have a slide out drawer under my desk and it fits perfectly in there where I can tuck it away and also pull it out, and it's always ready for me to play. I also have a 49 key MIDI controller, but for me, in the space that I'm currently in, I don't have somewhere that I can set it up and keep it permanently plugged in and ready to go at a moment's notice. And for me, the speed of being able to get to it and get down my ideas is crucial. So always think about the space that you have available and what will work for your workflow. If you don't have a lot of space to work with, I would recommend the Akai MPK Mini 2 because it's pretty small, but it's pretty powerful as well. But if you have more space to work with, I would recommend something like the Arturia Keylab 49. And one of the bonuses of getting a keyboard like that is it usually comes with some extra virtual instruments that you can use inside of your DAW. So the fifth piece of gear that we're gonna be talking about is headphones. Now, I highly recommend getting headphones over getting studio monitors when you're first starting out. And here's the reason that I say that. When you're just starting out, you're usually in your bedroom, and bedrooms are usually these very boxy little rooms. And if you put studio monitors in there, I guarantee you're not gonna have the acoustic treatment in there to give you an accurate representation of what's going on in the room, which means that your mixes are gonna come out really wonky. So I would highly recommend getting a pair of closed back headphones to get started with, and then eventually you can either get some open back headphones or even expand out to getting some studio monitors for your workflow. Now, I personally picked up a pair of headphones from a friend of mine. They were the Sony MDR V6s, which I don't think are in production anymore. The closest model to what I have would probably be the Sony MDR 7602s, which run about $100 for the pair. But if you have a little bit more money to spend, I would honestly look at getting the Audio-Technica ATH M50Xs. They run about 150 bucks, and honestly, I've had my eye on those for a while. I just haven't pulled the trigger to actually upgrade to those yet. Now, the sixth component of a studio that we're actually gonna talk about are just the accessories. Because there's so many people that tell you about all these great components that you need to get, but they don't tell you about all the extra things that you need to get to make them all work together. So here's a list of the things that you might need to get that will help your studio function a little bit more smoothly. The first thing is a good XLR cable. And this is going to be going from your condenser microphone or your dynamic microphone into your audio interface. And this will allow you to record audio from the microphone into the audio interface into the DAW. The second accessory that I would recommend getting is a really good quality instrument cable. So a 1/4-inch cable that will go from your electric guitar, your bass, or potentially even a synthesizer or some sort of keyboard piano setup to go into your audio interface as well. If you need stereo for that, you might want to go ahead and get 2 cables, but just make sure that they're pretty high quality. The third accessory I'm going to talk about is actually a stand for your microphone. So depending on what kind of microphone that you get, you can usually get a tripod boom stand for around $25 to $30 that will work pretty well. Or if you have a desktop that you can clamp onto, you could look at getting one of those boom arms that you see for like podcasters and those things. I've been using one of those lately, and I really like it for when I'm recording with my SM57 at my desk. And if you are getting a condenser microphone, one of the most important accessories that you can get is a pop filter for that microphone. And this is the thing that goes in between your mouth and the microphone to keep it from picking up the p and the b and all the plosive sounds that come out when you just sing directly into the microphone. And it's gonna make your recording sound a lot more professional. And I would highly recommend not getting the cheapest one that you can find, but to find one that's more in that mid-tier range. And those usually run somewhere in that $20 to $30 range for one that's pretty good. Now, if you don't have room for a MIDI keyboard on your desk or in a slide out drawer at your desk, one of the things that you might want to look into getting is actually a keyboard stand. And this is really only going to be applicable if you have a larger keyboard like a 49 key keyboard or a 61 or an 88. If you have a 25, you probably don't need the stand. And then the last accessory that I'm going to talk about is something so simple, but it's something that helps a lot, and that is just little Velcro straps. And these go to help you manage your cables for your XLR cord and for your instrument cables. And it will save you so much time just to get a couple of these to help you manage the cables inside of your studio. And as a bonus, one component that you need to look at getting is some of the free software VSTs that you can get access to. One that I highly recommend for people to get a hold of is the Native Instruments Complete Free Bundle, which comes with both instrument VSTs as well as some plugin and effects that you can use inside your DAW. And one of the benefits of that is it comes with a suite of plugins and tools that you can use for electric guitar or bass production, which means that it has amp models and it has pedal models, and you can create a tone and shape a tone for your songs and your productions. There are also some great VSTs from companies like Spitfire Audio. Labs is especially good, which has access to a whole lot of different instruments that you can download for free and use in your productions. And like I talked about earlier in the video, when you buy certain components for your studio, they're going to come with some VSTs and some plugins that you can use inside your DAW. So make sure whenever you purchase something new, like your Midi keyboard or your audio interface, check and make sure what kind of software comes with those items. Because when you download those and start using those in your DAW, you're getting a lot more sounds and a lot more effects than you would have just natively inside of the DAW that you're using. If you want to download a checklist of the 6 simple tools you need for your home studio, complete with all the links to the different things that I recommend, check the description down below. And if you're interested in using FL Studio as your DAW, be sure to check out the playlist over here that walks you through the basics of the program in under an hour. And I will see you in the next round.